In this lecture, you're going to learn how to write the functionality to auto log in a user who has deleted the account, but it is still within the 14 days time frame that we specify. So if the user attempts to log in within that time frame, remember in the email that we sent, we are going to auto log in the user again into the system and activate their account. So what we want to do is at the process when we activate the account, we also want to ensure that their record is actually deleted from the trash table. Alright, so let's go to the test editor and begin to write the functionality. For this, we need to open our login script. So we're going to go over to pass login. Remember that in our login script, we are already checking for a couple of things. The first thing that we're checking here is to see if the user has activated the account. If the user has activated the account, we log the user into the system. But if the user has not activated the account, we just display the message, please activate your account. So if you remember in the last lecture, when the user clicked on the deactivate account button, we actually set activated equal to 0. This means right now the user's account will not be activated, which means that we are going to do our auto login within this if statement. So within this if statement, we are going to check our trash table to see if the user who is attempting to log in has a record in the trash table. So if there's a record in the trash table, then we are then going to log in the user into the system and delete that record, set the activated column to be equal to 1 for that particular user. Alright, so this is going to be easy for us to do. If you remember in our utilities.php, we have a function in here to check for duplicate feeds. Alright, so this function, check duplicate entry. So what this function does essentially is to check a particular table and also the column that we specify here and see if a record exists. So if a record exists, it is just going to return true. If no record exists, it is going to return false. So we can actually use this function in our login script here, or you can just decide to write the code again. If you want to write the SQL statement again, you can just do something like this. So let's start from trash, where user ID is going to be equal to the placeholder ID, and then you execute the query to see if you get any record. You can then say if row count equals to 1, or if the fetch method gets any value, then you go ahead to do the other operations. So I'm just going to use that function to make things a lot easier, because if you think about it, this is why we actually write functions, so that we don't get to write code all over again. So we're going to say if check duplicate entry. First parameter will be the name of the table. In our case, this is trash. Next parameter is going to be the column name. This is user underscore ID. And then the next one will be the ID, the actual value. So we're going to pass in the ID that we retrieve from the database right here. And then the last one will be our database connection object. If this function returns a true value, we want to do 3 things. First one, we want to activate the account. Next, we want to remove the information from trash table. And then finally, we want to log in the user. If this function returns a false value, okay, what do we want to do? We want to say, please activate your account. Okay, right now we can actually give this a try. Let's just say here, we're going to say all okay. So if we get a true value here, that means there's a record in the trash table matching the user's information that is trying to log in. We're just going to flash this message all okay. Let's try this in the browser. So try to go with demo user again, sign in, and here we get the message all okay, because right here we have this user's ID existing in the trash table. All right, so let's continue with the code now. Going to get rid of this. So step 1, we want to activate the account. So we can just actually say db. We call the exec methods, and then we pass it the statement update users set activated equal to, let's just pass in the value. So activated should be equal to 1, where user, this should be ID, should be equal to our ID variable. And then just to be safe, we can set the limit equal to 1 to ensure that only one record is actually updated. So we say update users set activated equals 1, where ID equal to the user's ID. And then we limit this query to 1, which means only one record will actually be updated. So the next thing that we want to do is to actually remove the user's information from the trash table. So we're going to do the same thing. We use the shorthand method, db exec, then we pass it the query delete from trash where user underscore id is equal to id, and then we also set the limit equal to 1. All right, so since this is the first time we're using the exec method in this course, basically exec is just a shorthand PDO method that allows us to quickly update record in the database or delete record from the database. So it actually doesn't return a result set. All it does is returns the number of rows that we have fetched. So if, for instance, we wanted to see how many record was deleted, we can just actually echo the statement. So if we echo the statement, it's going to give us a value of 1 or the number of records that were affected. And then the last step here is to actually log the user into the system. So if you recall that when we log the user into the system, like we did in this section, we actually create some section variables. Here we create the section ID, we create section username. We also ensure that we get the fingerprint of the user. We get the time when the user logged into the system. And also we are checking if the user has clicked on the remember me functionality. And finally, we just echo out this message. We can actually just grab all these codes up to this place, okay, and then paste here. So if we paste this here like this, it's actually going to do the same thing. Our script works perfectly, but for me, I think this is a bit messy because it just makes the whole code long. So what we can do is actually extract this functionality into a function, and then where we need to log in a user, we just call in that function. So we can say here we're going to call a function called prep login. Okay, so, and basically this function, we accept some basic parameters, and those parameters are going to be the essential things that we need to log in a user. So for example, we need the ID, we need the username, okay, and then we also need to know if the user has clicked on the remember me button. So these are the three essential things that we need to log in the user. So we can actually just pass in those parameters here and say we want ID, username, and then we also want to get the remember me variable. So what we can now do now is to go to utilities.php and then create this function. You can see here that this function doesn't exist at the moment. All right, so we grab all of this code and then we go to utilities.php, and at the bottom we're going to create that function. So we're going to say function should be prep login, and this should take 3 parameters. First one should be ID, the second parameter should be the username, and then the last one should be the remember me. All right, so right here we can now paste all of that code. Okay, so we go back to our pass login and call the prep login function here. Pass in the ID, pass in the username, and then pass in remember me. All right, so this makes our code a lot more cleaner. So we are now ready to go over again to the browser and test out this functionality to see if it works correctly. Okay, so let's go over again to the browser now, do a refresh. First of all, we need to see our database. Currently, we have 1 record in the trash table, and here we have this account deactivated at the moment. So we come here, demo, and then tells us welcome back. Okay, so if we come over again to our database, click on browse, you can see that activated is set to 1 and our trash table should be empty. All right, so in the next lecture, we are then going to write the functionality to automatically delete the account after 14 days if the user doesn't log in.